Hello everyone, Michael Zeta here, and I'm going to start a new series, video teaching series, and it's going to be on the subject of Islam, which I think is very interesting. And we're going to be mainly talking about political Islam and the history of Islam. And um, a lot of my information is coming from a PhD. His name is Bill Warner. Um, I'm going to be reading some out of his book. A self-study course on political Islam. So if you'd like to there's three of them. Bill Warner, Warner, PhD, a self-study course on political Islam. And so what I would like to do is start with Muhammad. He's the person that we need to look at first because he's the founder of Islam. So let's look into a few things about his personality and who he is. And so he was an orphan as a child, and later became a businessman. He went on caravan trips to Syria. He was a very prosperous businessman. He was seen as a person who could settle arguments and heal disputes. He was very religious, and in his 40s he began to go on religious retreats, leaving the city of Mecca and praying by himself. Well, he had this experience where he said that he saw this person and heard a voice. And this person was never seen by anyone else, and this voice was never heard by anyone else. But it completely changed his life and who he was. So he came back to Mecca and he began to tell everybody, his families and friends, and that he had been chosen by God, and this God was later named Allah, to be his messenger. And so he began to introduce two principles that were to change him and to change the entire world. So the first of these principles is submission. Muhammad said that it'd be better if I get the other glasses. Muhammad said that the God of the universe told him to tell all people that they were to do exactly what he said, and when he said it, that their lives were to be patterned after him, because Muhammad was the perfect man, the perfect pattern. Now, this created as you can see, great dissension in Mecca, because he was also telling the Meccans that their ancestors were burning in hell. He then created at the same time a second principle called duality. Now, what happened was, and this is written in the Quran, their holy book, Muslim holy book, was that humanity is only divided into two: one believer and a non-believer, the Muslim and the Kafir. So he became very aggressive in pushing his message, and it irritated the Meccans. And so after 13 years, he failed to get many followers at all. He was argumentative. He caused trouble. And but the Meccans couldn't do anything about it because he was protected by his uncle. Well, his uncle died, and they said, "We're sick and tired of you. Get out." Leave. So he left and went to a town about 100 miles away called Medina. So in the time that followed, he became a politician and a warrior, and everything began to change after that. Now, he wasn't so much a successful politician as he was a very successful warrior. And he was successful through what's called jihad, and we'll talk about that later. But it was through jihad that he got a lot of money, and a lot of it. The second element of duality that Muhammad introduced is that there are two Muhammads. There's the religious preacher Muhammad, and then the warrior politician Muhammad. Duality is one of the things that is confusing about Islam. It always has two messages to preach. And the reason it has two messages to preach is because there are two Muhammads. If you look at the Quran, one's religious and one's political. He was a very religious man, but he wasn't very successful. But he was overwhelmingly successful as a warrior and a politician. In the last 9 years of his life, he averaged an event of violence every 6 weeks. By this process of constant warfare, he became the first ruler of all Arabia. Muhammad did not get along well with his neighbors. Even in the religious phase, he was pushy and aggressive. The Meccans didn't like that. They said, "You've created more suffering in this community than we've ever had before." Before he became a Muslim, he was a good neighbor. But after he became a messenger of Allah, he was an aggressive neighbor. When he went to Medina, his behavior got even worse. As an example, when he moved to Medina, this is history, okay, this is history. Half the town was Jewish. Within 3 years after he arrived, all the Jews had either been driven out of Medina, after their money was taken, or they had been killed and sold into slavery. But after Muhammad had conquered all of Medina, being a hostile neighbor had a new meaning. If you lived even 100 miles away, Muhammad would show up with his army, troops, and demand that you submit to Allah. Once he ruled all of Arabia, he was still a hostile neighbor. Before Muhammad died, he had struck out to the north to Syria to fight the Christians. His dying words were, "Let there be neither Jew nor Christian left in Arabia." Muhammad was the most successful military man who ever lived. As a political leader, he became all-powerful. We have other examples in history of men who became all-powerful, and we can measure them to some degree how powerful they were by how many people died because of them. The person who is in our history is known killed most people was Mao, Chairman Mao, the communist. As far as we can tell, figures show that through starvation and persecution and outright execution, Mao was responsible for the death of 40 million Chinese. Think about that. All for communism. Now we come to Muhammad. Muhammad had influenced the deaths through his principle of jihad and aggressive politics of 270 million people. Now, it took 400 years. Mao killed 40 million within his lifetime, but still, the total of those that Mao killed is fewer than those who were killed in the imitation, those who followed Muhammad. Let's see. Muhammad was a very dualistic personality. He had a sense of humor and he loved children. He wept when his favorite warrior was killed, but at the same time, he was a soft-spoken man who laughed heartily when the head of one of his enemies was thrown at his feet. He was a perfect slaveholder and slave trader. He got slaves in the time-honored way of killing their protectors. He attacked the tribe, killed the male members until the rest surrendered, and then they were given a choice to convert. If they didn't, they were sold into slavery. Women, children, men. This was profitable. Indeed, jihad was profitable. He used jihad to finance more jihad. Muhammad came up with a way to make religion and politics pay well. He was a very intolerant man. This is interesting. Before Muhammad, Arabs were noted for their religious tolerance. Indeed, Mecca, the town where Muhammad first rose to power, had 360 religions. No man was ever injured because of his religion until Muhammad. Muhammad converted the Arabs from being a tolerant to the most intolerant people, and the reason that the Arabs became intolerant was they followed the Sunnah of Muhammad, the teachings of Muhammad. One of the conventions regarding Muhammad today is that no one can tell a joke about him without dire results. You hear jokes about Jesus, Noah, Adam, St. Peter, God, but you never hear a Muhammad joke. You may remember when a Danish cartoonist, I remember this, he says, "Let's have a contest and see who can draw the best Muhammad cartoon." People died because of those cartoons, because Islam was offended. You can't make a joke about Muhammad, not even one. In fact, in Pakistan and other Muslim countries, to tell a joke about Muhammad is literally a death sentence. There's one more thing about Muhammad which explains Muslims and Islam. He never forgot a slight or an insult. Never. When he re-entered Mecca, this time triumphant after the jihad in Medina, the first thing he did, and here we have the essence of the man Muhammad. The first thing he did was to pray. The second thing he did was to have all religious art destroyed. So the religious objects of 360 religions in Mecca were destroyed. Muhammad helped build the fire and break the objects. The next thing he did was issue death warrants for 5 different people who criticized him. These were intellectuals, not warriors. For instance, 2 of the people who were killed were dancing girls. What had they done? They had been in a skit with a song and a poem that ridiculed Muhammad. Muhammad never forgot an insult. Islamic memory is long for any suffering. Muhammad is the most common name in the world after 1,400 years. He continues to be the most influential politician and warrior who ever lived. His life as the messenger of Allah shapes the ethics, morals, and politics and culture of over 1 billion Muslims. His politics have annihilated half of ancient Christianity, destroyed half of ancient Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism. Okay, we got into the life of some history of who this Muhammad is. And now I'm going to get into the basics, but we don't have, I only go about 15 minutes or so, but they're called the 5 pillars of Islam. Everyone thinks of Islam as a religion, but as you're going to discover, religion is the least of Islam. Islam is an entire civilization. It's a culture. It's a legal system. It's a thought system. It's an ethical system. Islam is all-encompassing. The most important fact about Islam is that it is a political ideology. Religion is of secondary importance. Religion is based on the 5 pillars. The politics are based upon jihad, the 6th pillar. Islam divides all the world into believers and kafirs. When you understand the concept of kafir, you will understand all of political Islam. The religion of Islam is simple. It's based on the 5 pillars. The first of these pillars is that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. If you say that in Arabic, in front of other Muslims, you have become a Muslim. It is the most central aspect of Islam, acknowledging both the Quran and the Sunnah, which is Muhammad's perfect example. Allah is not enough to be a Muslim. You must have the perfect example of Muhammad. The next pillar is charity. The zakat is a charity tax, but it's quite different from what most of us think of as charity. First of all, Muslim charities goes to Muslims, not kafirs, not Gentiles. There's another difference. Money given to Islamic charity can support jihad. It can support the creation of jihad. It can specifically for helping those whose family members have died in jihad. Another of the 5 pillars is prayer. Muslims are famous for their attitude towards prayer, which is done 5 times a day, even in public places. After prayers, we have Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. This is supposed to be done once in every Muslim's life if he can afford it. Another religious obligation is to fast every year in the month of Ramadan. Now, fasting for Muslims means that you don't eat or drink when the sun is up. At night, you can eat and drink as much as you want. Okay, we're going to get into more about jihad and more about the kafir, which I'm a kafir. And if you're listening to this, you're not Muslim, you're a kafir as well. So, this is going to be a very interesting teaching. Like I said, I'm teaching just historical facts. And I really do think that we Americans need to understand what Islam is. I will say this, Britain, and I have a lot of contacts in Britain, 20 years from now, Britain will be all Muslim because if you will, the evangelical mission of Islam is to convert the whole world. And so when nations open up their doors to Muslims from the Middle East, their mission is to grow and eventually get influence and go from influence to control the whole population. You either become a Muslim or you stay a kafir, which is a subset of their society. And it's not a very good life, by the way. Okay, so that's the beginning of this teaching. If you have any questions, you can always message me. All right, blessings.